Okay, good.
All right, I call this organizational meeting of LaBrae Board of Education to order. First order of business is election of officers. Need a motion for a nomination for president.
I nominate Mr. Stewart.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansel. And myself as president. Any other nominations? All right, nominations are closed. You vote on this first? I thought we voted on the second one. That's what I thought. All right, take a roll call vote. Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Yes. Motion carries 5-0. Need a motion to elect the vice president. Nomination.
I nominate Tim Gibson. Second.
Nominated by Mrs. Ansel, second by Mrs. Duncan for Tim Gibson. Any other nominations? All right, nominations are closed. We'll vote on the motion for Mr. Gibson as vice president. Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Gibson?
Yes.
Stewart? Yes. Motion carries 5-0. Mr. Gibson is our vice president. Now we need appointees. We need a delegate for the House School Boards and an alternate. Anybody wish to be the delegate? Anybody wish to be the delegate?
I'll do it.
All right, Mrs. Duncan, would like to be the delegate. Any objections? All right, appoint Mrs. Duncan as the delegate for the House School Boards. And who would like to be the alternate? All right, Mr. Gibson, he'll be the alternate. We need a member to serve as the legislative liaison to the House School Boards. Karen? Mrs. Ansel? Any objections? All right, Mrs. Ansel will be our liaison to the House School Boards Association. Next is the setting of the date, time, and location of the regular meeting. Oh, sorry. What's that? Motion second. Oh. Need a motion and a second for those delegates and the alternates.
So,
Second.
Motion by Mr. Morgan, second by Mrs. Ansel. Any questions? Treasurer, please call the roll. Mr. Morgan?
yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Yes, motion carries. Now we need to set the time, date, and location. We've been having it on the second Monday of each month, other than November, when it'd be the third Monday because of school board's meetings. And the time would be 6 o'clock, and the location would be either here or once in a while at Fiscal. Anybody have any objections? Do you want to keep the same time? Date? Anybody have any objections? Okay, can you make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, anyone?
Second.
Good. Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mr. Warren. Treasurer, please call the roll. Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Yes, motion carries 5-0. Next, we need to set bond for the treasurer at $50,000 payable to the state of Ohio, and bond for the superintendent and president of the Board of Education at $50,000 payable to the LaBrae Board of Education. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansel, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll. Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Yes, motion carries 5-0. Next is a motion be it resolved that the board approve the following authorizations to enable the treasurer to carry out necessary duties involving operations, finances, and purchasing for the calendar year 2021. Secure advances on tax settlements from the auditor when funds are available payable to the school district. To invest inactive funds as the most productive interest rate whenever inactive funds are available. To pay all bills within the limits of the appropriations resolution as bills are received and when goods and/or services have been received as ordered. To serve as the board representative at all required public records training. To sign all checks drawn on bank accounts of the school district in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 3313.08, to apply for funding for the following grants under guidelines for each grant application and authorize the district's participation in the programs Title I, IDA-B, Title VI, and other state or federally funded grants.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Morton, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Number 7, be it resolved that the board approve the following standing authorizations to enable the superintendent to carry out necessary duties involving operations for the calendar year 2021. To act as purchasing agent for LaBrae School District within the appropriation measures, to accept resignations on behalf of this board, which have been submitted by employees during times when the board is not in session, subject to ratification by this board. To approve attendance of employees within appropriations and professional meetings which lead to the improvement of the district's educational and operational programs per Ohio Revised Code 3313.20C. To alter the daily, weekly, monthly, or annual work schedules of administrative personnel as superintendent deems necessary to carry out the official duties of the district. To make offers of employment directly to candidates during periods when the board is not in session for either teaching or not teaching positions on behalf of the board, and to acknowledge acceptance of such offers on behalf of the board, subject to subsequent vote of ratification by the board. And to employ such temporary personnel for existing positions as is needed for special situations to ensure safety, security, protection of the district property and the orderly operation of the school district. Temporary is defined as up to 30 days.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion?
I'm not comfortable again, as I have in the previous years, with letter E about offering employment. I think it should always be brought to the board for discussion before we offer employment. And I know F used to say instead of special situations, it was emergency situations, which again, I think that would be more applicable. I think.
Well, under the circumstances, special is me, I think because of the COVID situation, that came under kind of a special situation. I don't know if you can qualify, sometimes it may not be emergency, maybe special. And I think by the superintendent's duties, we've given them the opportunity, they did the interviewing and stuff with the teaching or not teaching, along with two representatives of boards and everything, so we kind of give them that leeway. I don't want to take that away from them, because we may have to offer it in a quick time period. If we don't want to, we can rescind it. So I don't have any problem making the offer, we still have to approve it. But due to time constraints and sometimes because of contract negotiations and contract dates, I think that's why we need to leave that in there. They need to be able to make the offer when it's available. We have to take it. Sometimes they're up against the clock saying they got this job offer or that. If we don't offer, they may take the other one. May lose a good employee. And that's just my opinion. Anybody else?
No, I'm with you. I don't see I see what you're talking about. It may be a quick turnaround. You want to do something immediately. And I have no problem with that. The fact that we could change it if we want to as a board, then that would be fine, because we have that option.
I think it's always hard to go back and rescind an offer from someone. And that's why I think it should be discussed amongst the board before you actually hire someone or tell them that they are hired. They could put us in a difficult situation to rescind.
Well, technically, we do that because we have to approve it.
Right, but to offer and then say, the board decided we don't want you.
But there could be a case where something comes up that we don't know about during the time period when the offer is made, something we all want to rescind it to. Something might have happened, maybe they got arrested or something. That's a strange case, but that could happen. It's our duty to approve or not approve. It's superintendent's job to make the recommendations on who to hire. And again, I mean, we do have two board members that sit on the teaching and the non-teaching. So we do have input before that. And again, you know, it is up to us to finally approve it, because it's subject to a subsequent vote for ratification. So we do have final say, no matter, you know.
Yeah, I
It may
understand.
look bad, but I don't think it's happened that often where it's up to rescind it. I think the superintendent gets enough input from us, whether we're looking for someone, and he usually gives us the resumes, and we get feedback from the board members who are on the interview committee. So I can understand your concern, but I don't, sometimes it may not be prudent for us to, you know, take the time. Can't always have a special meeting in time to do it. That's kind of the way I feel.
I would interject just a couple pieces of information. One is we make it a habit of always telling people that we offer positions of employment that it's not final until the board votes on it. So it's kind of a conditional offer. So that is one thing that we try to get people to understand, that while we might be offering you a job, it is not done until the board passes it with at least 3 votes. And then the other thing that I think that we run the risk of jeopardizing is the ability to secure people when it is of a particular nature where the hiring crunch is under us. And, you know, most recently, in some cases that's not always going to be the case, but in many cases when you're hiring in June, or you're hiring in May, when a lot of other districts are, I can tell you that last year when we offered one particular position, there were people with multiple other interviews and one with another offer. So, you know, it is, in many cases, it's not always that way, but sometimes to be able to make an offer and have confidence that a Board of Education is likely to support it, allows us to secure the people before we lose them. In the absence of that, we might have to call more special meetings because, for example, if you call a meeting prior to, or if we have an offer after we've already had a board meeting, but we want to secure or wrap up something from a personnel standpoint and can't afford to wait till the next monthly meeting, you know, we could always, would have to resort to having more special meetings for that purpose. That's another piece of information that might play into that.
Any other comments, discussion? All right, Treasurer, please call roll.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan.
Yes.
Mrs. Mansell.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
No.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 4-1. Next, be it resolved, LaBrae Board of Education approve the maximum credit for any district credit card of $30,000 in accordance with LaBrae Education Policy Number 6423 and Ohio Revised Code 3313, 311.
So moved. Second?
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Anderson. Any discussion? Last year, 25,000.
No,
No?
no.
Huh. I know it's going up.
Last year's board minutes are on the website if you want to see them. They're identical.
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
All right. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan.
Yes.
Mrs. Mansell.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item number 9, be it resolved that the members of the LaBrae Board of Education shall be compensated the maximum rate authorized by law for a maximum of 12 meetings per year in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 3313.12.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? It is currently $125. Currently, it is $125 from what's listed.
Is there a minimum rate that they have, or is it just 0, or what?
I think there is a minimum. Each school board can set their own.
The maximum per year is $5,000, which by limiting it to 12 meetings, is not going to,
Yeah, I don't think there's a minimum. I think it's, the state law just sets a maximum.
Yeah. They don't go to high school. All right, treasurer, please call the roll.
Fiscal,
Yes.
Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Dumpy,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 10, be it resolved by Board Bylaw 0168, Ohio Revised Code 3313.26, that the board will waive the reading of the minutes from the previous meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Morgan, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Dumpy,
Yes.
Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 11, be it resolved that the treasurer authorized to establish a board service fund in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 3315.15.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mr. Gibson. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Dumpy,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 12, designate official newspaper. The Warren Tribune Chronicle shall be designated as the official newspaper for publications.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion?
We couldn't have a New York Times.
I don't think so.
Okay, just ask.
You can call and ask them. See if they would do it. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Dumpy,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Item 13 is recommended the LaBrae Board of Education adopt the following resolution. The legal services of the law firms as specified herein are hereby retained for 2021. Such legal services are to be in the nature of legal representation, including appearances in court, advice, opinion, and recommendations as may from time to time be requested by the board or the superintendent as to legal matters relating to education. In rendering such legal services as an independent contractor in attorney-client relationship, said firm shall not exercise any administrative discretion on behalf of the board in the formulation of public policy, expenditure of public funds, enforcement of laws, rules and regulations of the state, any country or cities of this board, or the execution of public trust. The retention of such services may be terminated at any time by the board or said firm by written notice to the other. Section 2, for such legal services, said legal services approved list, fees and costs for such services shall be at the usual and customary rates for the professional services rendered upon receipt as an itemized statement by the school district treasurer. And be it finally resolved, such legal services shall be available on call, on demand, and at the request of the board president and the superintendent with informed notice provided to all board members. And our approved legal list is Manchester, Newman, and Bennett, Manstown, Squire, Patton, and Boggs in Cleveland, Dingo and Bear Law in Independence, Enos Britain Company in Cleveland, and Ohio School Boards Association in Columbus. Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? No, I will not repeat. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Now I need a motion to adjourn this organizational meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Duncan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. I'll give you a couple minutes to get set up for the next.
We're 10 minutes till 6. In the meantime, we
10
can
minutes, and we'll start at 6 o'clock.
try to figure out a
Take it.
better volume. This is a live mic, so we'll see if we can pause it and see what happens. See if we can.
Was it registering anything or just low?
Well, no, it was low, and then we turned it up and it seemed to get better. But,
It was on to start?
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Morty, anybody want to watch the game?
Any of the rest of those with Mark and Ty and
Well, Mark went out there, he's golfing, I mean, that indoor league tonight. I forgot about the meeting, so I told her. Last week, Joe went with me because it was so loud. So Kurt was gonna be good, and I said, I can't make it, so I asked Joe to go on Monday last week. Oh, yeah, that's no problem. And I called Dave, so, still golfing. Oh, no, I thought it was Tuesday. Joe, meeting's on Monday, the golf was, I set you the schedule. And that's why, at least I called ahead of time. I did that last week. And I said, I'll pick you up at 4:30. He called me at 4. Where are you? I'm like, oh, I thought you were coming. I am at 4:30. It's only 4 o'clock. It's an indoor thing. Yeah, my nephew's, Larry Slater's, Nicole. He's a golf pro at the, well, was at Trump Country, not a got the leash. But he bought it 2 years ago on the indoor simulators with the coach. We had it at Riverview the last 2 years, but Scott can go to the COVID stuff. So actually, Brian Pierce, our son, he's got a big garage, so we just set it up in there. It was fun. It's a lot of fun.
how many teams?
We go Monday through Wednesday. We do 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock.
Different courses.
Yeah, well, last week we did, St. Andrews. The first week we picked, we were the first ones there. I picked Magnolia, Mississippi. That's the hardest one ever. They golfed Jeremy and John McNamoli. Those guys kept getting in the woods and in the rivers and stuff. In Andrews, Joe hit one out of bounds like 3 times in a row.
Keep your score on 200.
We actually did good, because Kurt and I get to play from the senior teams, because they do give you that, and we had a high enough. We won skins every week. And Don was giving me a hard time, he goes, you guys get a stroke almost every other hole. So we did. We put a couple, dropped them in, and lost a stroke. So the one registered as legal. So, it's a lot of fun. We're not, I think Kurt and I are like 6th place.
Well, that's where we got into.
Well, Don, I think he had more people wanted to. He moved it, because we're at Ryan's house, so he's. How long is it? Well,
You know, with the microphone on the live, on the, are you talking about the Dell?
The
How
two
would I
man
turn
teams
it
in
on?
basketball. But the fun is, lay out each course.
Well, the Bluetooth is in. I don't know what else there is to do, and it's lit up.
How much power you got.
I just don't know.
Huh? Oh, yeah, all of that. And even on the green, it's got like a grid of the green that shows where it's, which way that will come.
Can you hear me now?
With little bubbles and stuff in there. That one, I hit one, it was, 53 yards. I hit it 50
I
yards.
think I went to the sound and turned off the Realtek audio.
I mean, it rolled all the way back to where I was shooting. Rolled front, yeah. That was the one that's in
And then I
here.
just turned up the 3 new audio adapter to 100.
But it's fun, yes, sir.
So that might be why we were picking up my keyboard mix because
Any LPA, help call
the audio
first.
speaker for
This one you can't.
turned off. So now on my Dell laptop, I have the Realtek audio, which is the headphone speaker in the Dell off. And I've got the 3 new audio adapter all the way up to 100. So I don't know if that'll be any better. You might want to just try to text me that way we don't have that chat notification just like you know. Okay? Because I have a text feature on my laptop that you see. Okay, alright, we're gonna move forward. Yep, thanks.
Oh, that's really, yeah, he lives with us. Larry keeps telling me, Gar keeps telling us, come on down, I'd like to go. I mean, they came up for Christmas, we only got 6 months. they start babysitting, and as soon as they got there, they were told about the kid, boy over. And then the next day, they're taking off, doing the triplets. That's all they did, babysit. Well, Larry said first couple days, they didn't even unpack the car. Yeah. When you watch something after those kids,
That's his mistake, I told him when they were coming.
yeah. But we didn't even get, Perkins, Flunkies, so we didn't brought their birthday. So we missed that. Very strange. I don't even know if we're gonna go to Vegas this year. Probably not. Lunch and cheese? When?
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah? Where at? We're going to Natty Castle.
No, they're all together.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, county is, but really close. When do you usually go there?
March Madness.
Really?
Yeah, it's like 40-something years ago.
I might be going to the first week before the meeting.
Well, I usually try to get there for St. Patty's Day, but I'm getting all these free rooms and flights are cheap. I just don't know if I want to take a chance. I talked to Scott Kruger, my buddy's down in Florida. They're not too sure if they want to go. Jared's not sure, and Adam's not sure either. Denny didn't say anything about going.
No, it's,
He might not.
So yeah, you can get like,
oh, he fell to the moon.
you can get around trip, but,
Well, and one guy, they had
right.
Here.
The frontier, yeah.
Yes.
Really well, I think it was 20 pounds.
Usually got second, he left 2 people.
Yeah.
That's what my son said. We got, I got 3 free nights at, quite a few places. One was 4. I think,
Certain like properties.
Bellagio, I got 3. Aria, I got 2. No, Bellagio, I got 2 free nights. Aria, I got 2. Park MGM, I got 4.
Those are all MGM properties.
Yes.
What do you get from? Those on the line there, we have 3 cars.
There's one out there. All right, we're gonna get started. Okay, I call this regular board meeting to order. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Vansell. Here. Duncan. Here. Mr. Gibson.
Here.
Mr. Morton.
Here.
Mr. Stoll.
Here. All right, stand and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order is superintendent's report. Mr. Calder.
Okay, just to update you, reminder that on Martin Luther King Day, we will have Farnham equipment back out to re-examine the work they did on the telescopic seating. I would expect that could be, because there's no students in the building, it could be a review, repair, have completed that day. At least that is our hope. If not, then it might take another day like President's Day in February to get back out, because we have to pick a time where they can get it out and work on it without having to be interrupted by the lunch and cafeteria operations that we do on a particular day. Just within the last week or so, Mr. Panic received some waiver documents from Everflow. Everflow, you might recall, is the company that the district years ago contracted with for the wells that were on school district property. And if you also might recall that when we tried to, when BP was in the area leasing property, we examined on whether or not we could add our acreage to those leases, but we don't own the rights to those leases, so we couldn't pursue that. But we have one well at the bus garage. It's behind the mechanics part of the bus garage, and it's kind of defunct, and we don't get any revenue off of it. It's not operable, so they finally want to cap it. They first reached out to Mrs. Jones in 2010 and inquired as to whether or not the board wanted to purchase the well for $1, but then you got to pay the money on all the equipment. And at that time, based on what Mrs. Jones had documented with a letter, the board was not interested. So we signed, they want to finally cap it. So Mr. Panic signed the paperwork to cap it as originally intended. And then what that will do is it will exempt either ourselves or Everflow from having to do the annual or quarterly maintenance that the Department of Natural Resources would expect. So when it's capped, the state of Ohio will consider it a defunct well, and there's no service that you have to conduct. If it's not capped, then obviously they treat it as a live and active well. So they have a vested interest to cap it, not waste resources on maintaining it, and like I said, there's very little production. So that was signed. Mr. Panic sending them the letter, and they'll cap that well in the coming weeks. We also, sorry.
If I remember right, I think the cap, I think it was like around $5,000 or something. Plus, I think we had to maintain a bond with the state. Maybe we had to pay a bond to have the state keep it open. But I think it was around $5,000 cap it back. I know it's not cheap, and they weren't doing anything that cost them more than maintenance, so and we're not going to do it.
No, and we don't want the equipment.
No.
So there's no reason to try to buy it for $1 and then, whatever the equipment charge is, so. And that's where they would, naturally, that was our assumption, is that's where they would make possibly a few bucks, but not much off of it if you were to buy it, so. We also we don't have the money yet, but the state of Ohio under House Bill 166, which was the last biennial budget or the current budget that we're on, and we're in the last 6 months of that budget currently, created security grant dollars. And the last year we used security grant dollars from House Bill 166. It was about $4,800. We used it for classroom safety equipment for all of our staff in the event you had an active intruder situation. And we did that in partnership with the Warren Township Police. This year we're getting $5,400. We've submitted the paperwork to say that we want the grant money, and then of course we're going to explore some options on how we can spend that. We can spend it on securing facility, we can spend it on safety training. The state of Ohio gives you a list of about 10 or 12 things that you can spend the safety or security money on. So we've submitted the paperwork, and in all likelihood we'll have that money in the coming weeks, and then we have to report next fall how we used it. So that is underway. That money will go away, assuming it doesn't get rolled over into the new budget. It's a 2-year deal. The money goes away after that, and we're paid that money on a per student dollar figure. That's how they arrive at it. Bigger districts get more security money. Smaller districts likewise. As far as our students are concerned, obviously we've mentioned to you about the intent to return, and we are up to 63 students will be coming back on the 25th of January, and our principals and building offices are working to ensure that those students are slotted into appropriate cohorts. And then of course they're working with Mr. Cemento to ensure that the students that typically rode our transportation or took advantage of our transportation services are on the appropriate bus. Because remember, we're only running 8 bus routes at the current time. So that's something that we will have done before the 25th. Our current COVID data that we have on our website and our COVID Central, where we put our own dashboard of cases, we have 18 student cases, and we have 16 staff cases. So we have not had a student case that has become positive since our return. But we have had a couple staff cases, and we update that, and then we report those figures once a week to the Ohio Department of Health. And those get put in on the state dashboard, where you can look up all the schools across the county as well as across the state. The Ohio Department of Health is using new quarantine guidelines, and the governor had even come out on top of that and said when it comes to students, now first of all, the CDC said we're going to reduce the quarantine period from 14 days to 10. You can come back after 7 if you've had a negative test. Now at this point, we're not honoring that. That's a little bit nuanced to be managing and getting test results. And because are the very places that people go with test results. We're not quite to that point where we could trust having consistently get people back with a negative test. And I'm primarily speaking about staff. But it's definitely impossible with students because of the very places that parents could possibly take a student. Many of our staff are now channeled to Steward Health. They don't have to go to Steward, but we have set up at a place in Austin town where Steward has a facility. They've given us a special opportunity for Trumbull County school districts to provide contact information to staff members. If they have symptoms, they can call Steward. They can schedule an appointment and get their test on that appointment time rather than waiting in line. So remember, they graciously worked with the Trumbull County schools because many of us were having staffing issues and said that if we're to keep schools open, we have to help schools stay staffed. And so that's why this is important, because you get people who are symptomatic to some degree, and then we find out they're negative. That's beneficial because then it's just a matter of how sick are they, and sometimes can you have some head congestion, seem like you have symptoms but return to work. That becomes an individual decision versus, oh, this person's symptomatic, they've got COVID and they've got to stay away for 10 to 14 days. So that new testing program that we've arranged with Steward will be very beneficial for us in a positive way and a negative way as well, if that makes sense. Because they're going to find some negative test results, and that's positive to facilitate staffing. But likewise, you're going to also get your share of negatives based on our high positivity rate in the county. So that CDC guideline says 10 days is the new period of quarantine, and then you have to monitor yourself on days 11 through 14. You can return to work or school after day 10 so long as you're not symptomatic. If you're symptomatic in any way, you stay away. But you can come back after 10. And so that's the new CDC guideline that in December, the state of Ohio, their Department of Health endorsed it. Then the governor came out and said that when it comes to students, you do not have to quarantine if students or staff maintain 6 foot of distance and were masked in a classroom setting. That does not mean the cafeteria. It does not mean athletics. It doesn't mean, any other kind of setting. When the governor said classroom setting, he was very adamant that his office communicated to the Department of Health. Classroom setting means a traditional standard classroom. Anything outside of that, you're going to have to quarantine and do more stringent contact tracing. Then about a week later, I think this was last week, they came out and extended that to the bus. So I'm not here to offer value judgments on, that particular issue, but the concept is if you're 6 feet and you're masked and you don't break 6 feet, then you do not have to quarantine students. Now, what the governor's office has said they are doing is they're basing that on what they see as transmission data coming from schools. And they're seeing the case studies across the state of Ohio among 600 plus public school districts and private schools is that students are not transmitting it to one another when they're maintaining distance and when they are having constant masking. So those are two key things. And as our health commissioner has indicated to us in the meetings, if you're staying 6 feet apart and you break that barrier, then that doesn't apply. If you're staying 6 feet apart and you've got people in a room without masks on, that doesn't apply. You will be quarantining. You've got to have both, and you've got to practice both of them strictly. So that's the model that we have been following last week and this week. So when we do our contact tracing, we are looking for those types of assurances. And if we don't have them, then we're going to be requesting students or staff, as applicable, quarantine appropriately. And then the other thing relative to COVID and our protocols, the governor came out last week, and you might recall he said that the vaccine is going to be prioritized to school staff of school districts that commit to in-person learning by March 1st. And what he means by that is you're either 100% all day, every kid, or you're a hybrid model, but you have to have in-person learning. If you're 100% remote, you're not going to be given priority over districts that have students in session. So we are already obviously back in our hybrid model, and we would qualify for that prioritization. And we have submitted our paperwork. Early today, we sent that into the Department of Health to get us on the list so that those of our staff members who want the vaccination can have access to the vaccination when it becomes available. Of course, you hear in the news a lot of the discussion about the distribution issues that might be going on. So in light of those distribution challenges, it becomes difficult to project when that vaccine might be available. But we anticipated hopefully being within the next 6 to 8 weeks. In the area of finance, the last time we met, we had a discussion about how to talk to the Matthews Board of Education. I did provide Mr. Sewell the contact information for the Matthews Board President. At this point, I would ask Mr. Sewell to share out if he has anything he wants to share about those details.
Yeah, I talked to Michelle, and she said that their board kind of agreed we didn't need to have a full meeting with, any more representatives, that she thought she could address it. And they were pretty happy with the situation. They hadn't noticed any difference. They're getting what they want out of it. They seem pretty happy. Her concern was that Brad could handle it, wouldn't run himself out. So I told them we're happy. Seems to be working. It's a little change for us, not having someone there every day. And they said the same. That was the only thing, but they said that's easy adaptable. Main thing is they're getting their work done. He's getting their work done for their district. He's getting the work done for our district. I guess that's the number one focus. That's what we really want. Can we do the job that we need? Can we do the job for what they need? So they're satisfied, and we are too. So I kind of left it at that. We're both happy with what it is. So they'll discuss it during his evaluation and move forward to that. Overall, they didn't have any questions, or they said you need to talk to her or whoever the new president is. You can give them a call. So they're happy. Comes out well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, I don't know if I told this to the entire board, or if it was a conversation that I had with Mr. Sewell when I gave him the contact information, but when you consider the change, really, we're the ones that have probably bared the brunt of the change. Because Matthews, it's just, it's business as usual over there, and that's old hat to Brad and his staff in his treasury department. But for him and our way of doing things and our staff, that's where all the changes happen. And as you know, we've shared with you some of those growing pains that we've had. But for the most part, I think some of that has been smoothed out. We're making some progress in those areas. Mr. Penn, do you have anything to offer on that front?
No, I think it's, the point, yeah, win-win.
Okay.
Win-win.
All right. As far as personnel is concerned, the board has been provided performance evaluations on the treasurer and the superintendent. These are blank evaluations for you to fill out individually and then get those back to Mr. Sewell by January 21st. You can get those to us at the board office, and I think Mrs. Powell, my secretary, provided you with envelopes in there that you can seal, and Mr. Sewell will pick them up on the 22nd of January, or you can deliver them to him individually. That is your preference, but in light of what we have going on with the shared treasurer arrangement, that is going to be a priority that you give due attention to that, because this board would have to act on Mr. Panic's contract for going forward, being that this is the current contract we have, remember, is, well, for lack of a better phrase, it's just odd. And that's because Matthews still employs him. We have a smaller contract that picks up the difference, and then we pay Matthews for our share. But if we were to move forward, there would be a figure compensation package future contracts would split it 50-50. Okay, so we would end up paying Mr. Panic more directly, and we would pay Matthews less money. So, but if you want to follow employment law and be compliant, you have to have evaluated him and you have to have acted on his contract by March 1st. So we need to get that evaluation so that Mr. Sewell can sit and meet with him as well as myself, and we can do that, I believe, easily prior to the next board meeting if he has those evaluations on no later than the 21st.
If you have any questions on anything on that, just let me know or make a note on your evaluation forms. Remember, it's supposed to be based on 1 year evaluation from that. Brad hasn't been here for a full year, so we just gotta use what you know about him right now, so there may be a lot of not available, not enough information, that's fine. As long as I have the information, I can pass along and meet with him to evaluate him, Mr. Calderon. So, get your comments, as they are. If you have any other questions, let me know. You can drop them off, or, the office, and I'll pick them up. And what I do is I usually consolidate the information. I have one blank form that I put all of our answers down, and go over it with both the individuals, giving the evaluations. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So we also provided you with a copy of our 2020-2021 personnel profile report. We usually provided that to you around late October, early November. We're a little bit behind on that this year. Mrs. Powell and myself compiled that. We reviewed it, and that is loaded into your Google Drive. Remember, that is a comprehensive look at certified, classified staffing, and could be useful as you explore our staffing through the year and going in the next year. As far as some miscellaneous items, you might recall that the special education handbook was provided to you, a draft back in the fall. We have been vetting that. We've made no effort to bring that to you yet for approval. I will be giving you an edited version. One of the things that we'll be doing is making some areas of that document that we can condense and streamline. That's a rather comprehensive document, but I'm waiting for some final evaluation on that, and then I will sit down with Mrs. Frederick and we will go over those recommended edits, and we'll review it one final time and bring it back to you in a final format for approval. Then I didn't know if anybody had additional strategic plan considerations, but I'd like to, between now and February, maybe make final edits, if there are even edits to make. But, I will take into light Mr. Sewell's accommodations or recommendations with regards to safety and pandemic health issue responses. But if you have those, please, we can talk about them now, or if you don't have any, that's fine as well. And we can move forward with a board approval of a revised plan or approval for the plan for 2021. And that's, at this point, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, then we'll move forward.
Any questions, comments on the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll move into public participation. Do you have anything from the public?
I have 0 questions from the public.
I figured we would do it.
Yep.
So do we do the budget or the calendar?
Yeah, we'll do that right now. Mr. Panic, you want to talk about the budget resolutions and figures?
Yeah, so the alternative tax budget that is submitted for approval later on, there's a few different charts there, and it all starts from January 1, 21 until December 30th, 2020, so the 18-month span. So the first chart is for the general fund, and those figures should closely match with the forecast starting in FY22. It really gets the FY22 figures. And then the second one is the bond retirement. That's your the O2 fund and the FinSum, and the only revenue really is property taxes, and the receipts are just the principal and interest. And
Is that the actual receipts, or is that what we're projecting?
this is what we're projecting, and this kind of also takes into account, slowly, but maybe we should do more rapidly, decreasing the millage rate of that bond to because of the cash balance the bond, retirement fund has. PI fund is just the millage, and the property tax receipts, and then, expenditures can be just whatever we have approved really. Crossing facilities and then all the other funds are, on the third page. Special revenue is most of them, that being all your student activities and all your Title I, all Title I.
And you base a lot of those expenditures off of what?
Historical trend, kind of, but that's enough too. Same with the enterprise fund, which we have the food service fund.
And you're not projecting any CARES. You're just
No.
using it as whatever you actually got.
Yeah, whatever we actually got, yeah. Yeah, no, there's, I do not know.
The other part of that too, though, is it's a federal fund. And generally, the budget hearing, tax hearing is based off of those funds where you're generating revenue from your taxpayers.
Yeah.
And so, the only way this would be included is if for some reason those federal funds were to be included in the school's general fund budget. And the federal government has articulated that any CARES funding is to go through title. So it would be excluded.
And then the last page, there's just our outstanding debt service for the building. Doesn't include the debt service for the facilities, that's the general fund debt service. So we have 2.3 million principal, 100,000, and 130,000 interest. This is 12/1/24, so it's pretty close. That's about things about.
Any questions on the budget items? Okay. Move on to the calendar.
Yeah, as far as the calendar is concerned, we have a draft calendar that I loaded a little midday here for you. Naturally, we're not acting on it tonight, but it's there for you to look at. Probably, adjust it accordingly. This is a tentative calendar, and I think when you look at it, it has us starting in the last week of August with some teacher days, right before Labor Day, the week before Labor Day. Your standard Thanksgiving break of a Wednesday through Friday, 2 weeks of Christmas, 4 days for Easter recess, which is a Friday through Monday. We have makeup days where that Monday after Easter could be a makeup day if next year's calamity days warrant makeup time. And then we have the last week of school could be bumped back accordingly. If we had such significant weather that we had to make up time, we could push beyond that. So we will go back and evaluate those days and make sure our counts are right for student and teacher days, and then come back and expect to act on a calendar at the February 8th meeting. So we generally don't have too much variance in how we deviate from previous calendars occasionally. I would say this, we don't anticipate at this time any professional days like we have in the past. I don't know that the county is planning on any advanced professional days. I know as I kind of massage the calendar and put this together a little bit, I don't even know that we want them, to be honest with you, because we might only be like 1 or 2 days, but the initial thought is having those days with students in session will be important to us next year. But that, again, could be subject to change, depending on our needs, especially the K-5 level with the literacy plan. Because we might have to have a few special professional days, maybe 1 or 2 for those grade levels next year.
Anybody have any questions on the calendar? Okay, we'll move into our regular agenda items. Turn it back over to Mr. Caldwell.
Okay. First item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the minutes from its December 14th, 2020 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Fiscal?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the December financial report as presented by the treasurer.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mr. Morgan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Fiscal?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the board adopt the alternative tax budget for the succeeding fiscal year as presented by the treasurer per Ohio Revised Code 5705.28, Section A, Clause 1.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Fiscal?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education adopt the following resolution. And that resolution, in essence, is an acceptance of the taxation limits outside of the 10 mil inside millage, and then the expected revenues to be derived from those levies. You can see there that, LaBrae has a valuation of property value across all classes of $122 million. And you can see we are looking at 4.8 mils of inside millage that is not subject to voter approval, that is within the 10 mil constitutional limit as shared by other public entities like the townships. And then outside of the 10 mil limit, we have 42.5 mils of operating money in the general fund, 4.4 mils for the bond, 3 mils of permanent improvement levy, a half mil of classroom facilities, for a total of 50.4. And when you add that in with our 4.8, our total district millage inside and outside is 55.2. And I would let you know that the 4.4 mils is a reduction of 0.1 mil, a tenth of a mil, from 4.5. And in my conversations with Mr. Panic, as we've explored our reserve of unspent principal and our future collections, we know that next year we'll probably be a lot more aggressive in reducing that because we have got to start to draw down more money out of that reserve to pay this off, because we have till 2024. All right. We were a little hesitant to do that right now because we're not quite sure what the delinquencies will look like in the aftermath of the economic recession created by the pandemic. So to draw down, we have a reserve, but to draw down too much, we didn't want to reduce it too much because we need to make sure that we're covered on both bases. But we do expect to be more aggressive at reducing that rate over the next 4 years.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mr. Gibson. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiscal?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Okay, Mr. Panic will certify that resolution and send a copy of it to the auditor's office. I would have one follow-up comment. While this is the voted millage, this is not the effective millage. And coming up this week, I will send you a copy of last year's valuation report from the auditor's office as well as a copy of this year's. And with the 122 million of property valuation, that's the assessed valuation. That's what's subject to taxation. And remember, Ohio taxes property values at 35%. So we just went through a triennial update. So our valuation is up by about $9 million. Now you would think, man, if valuation's up, we're going to get more money. But that's not the case because House Bill 920, passed in the late 70s, adjusts the millage so that it draws the same amount of money all the time and taxes aren't going up because of inflation in property values. So our effective millage is really nowhere near the millage that you see on the paper. That resolution is about voted millage, but the actual millage in effect is a lot lower because of House Bill 920. And in the school funding crisis, one of the things that some legislators have said is, that law is 42 years old. And maybe it's time that they revisit that. Now, I doubt that they will, but I just want you to understand, just because the valuation's up, that's not necessarily going to mean income comes up because of House Bill 920. Okay, next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve a membership with the Ohio School Boards Association at an annual membership cost of $5,086, effective January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2021.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mansell,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation the Board of Education approve a resolution authorizing joining the Ohio School Boards Association Legal Assistance Fund for calendar year 2021 at a cost of $250.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation letter for retirement purposes of Alan Montgomery from the classified bus position of bus driver effective January 1, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mr. Moore. Any discussion?
I just want to say that, Mr. Montgomery is, he's been with us since 2011. He's done an admirable job. Spoke with him when he dropped off his letter, and I know this is something that's more of a personal health decision and wanting to be safe, and he's more than interested in when some of this stuff blows over next year, maybe, coming back and being a sub driver for us or doing whatever we need. He wants to stay active, but right now, going to step away, and we appreciate all the work that he's done. He's been very reliable, and we appreciate his services to our students.
Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Mansell,
Yes.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding for the College Credit Plus program, which will allow secondary school students to enroll in college-level courses to receive college credit during the 2021-2022 school year. And we want you to approve the agreement with Kent State University for next school year.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mr. Morton. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education hire James Bailey as the varsity baseball head coach for the 2020-21 school year. And of course, this is going to be effective with his completion and satisfaction, and he's completed all the revised code requirements to coach and lead a pupil activity permit. And again, should the program be jeopardized because of some directive or order from the Ohio High School Athletic Association or the Department of Health or the governor of the state of Ohio, then the contract will be paid on a pro rata basis.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mr. Gibson. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education hire Dimitra Noble as the varsity softball head coach for the 2020-2021 school year. Again, effective with her proving that she's satisfactorily completed all revised code requirements to coach and lead a pupil activity permit. And on the same pro rata basis, should any governmental order from Ohio High School Athletic Association or the governor or the Department of Health jeopardize that season or shorten it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Morton, second by Mrs. Ansell. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Stoll?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation the Board of Education approve the following athletic supplemental positions for the 2020-2021 school year. And you can see we have some baseball assistant coaches, Mr. Huff, Mr. McCartney, the boys basketball volunteer, Mr. Downey, winter physical fitness, Mr. Armini, Dotson, McConnell, and Varsity.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Stoll?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Anything under miscellaneous? All right, we'll move to concerns of the board. Start with Mr. Gibson.
Just like to thank everybody, the staff at school for continuing through the pandemic to give us the good reports and everything. Building reports for that this month were very, seemingly comprehensive. It got us up to date on things. And it's very different than usual just because of the pandemic and stuff. But I enjoyed reading those and you know what was going on. We did a nice job. That's all.
Mr. Ward.
No,
Mrs. Duncan.
It's good to see everybody back at school. Hopefully we'll all stay healthy. Keep going in the right direction.
Mrs. Ansell. The only thing I want to thank everybody for their vote of confidence in the president again. Try to do a good job. Make sure about the valuations, try to get them in. And we will need a motion to go into to executive. Do you want to say one thing? Hopefully the Buckeyes do well. Just want to throw that in there. If you need a motion to go into executive session to discuss the employment of personnel.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Ansell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We will go into executive session. There won't be no votes taken during executive session. There will be no votes taken after executive session. And we will come out to adjourn, but we will end the live broadcast. Hopefully everybody just stay safe and we'll be back next month. We'll go into executive session. I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so this concludes the live portion of the January 11th LaBrae Board of Education meeting. After exiting executive, again, to reiterate Mr. Sewell's comments, the district board will have one motion to adjourn the meeting. And this ends our live stream.